tonight because I don't have a whole lot to talk about unless you guys have a lot to talk about. But I wanted to give a little bit of an update on the TOT grants and homelessness. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the propositions that passed or did not pass and why that was good for the county, how that impacted the county. We're also going to have a brief update on senior resources and some events that we had recently on that relating to senior resources. And then we're going to open it up for questions and answers, and I anticipate we'll have plenty of time for that. So to begin, I wanted to share a little bit about the economic development support grants that the county has. For those of you who are not aware, in 2017 the county allocated $1 million for economic development grants in the county, and it went very well. That year we got 18 million in applications, 146 applications and 18 million worth, and we only had $1 million to give. So it was hard to make those decisions, and what the county ended up doing is hiring a consultant that looked at all the applications, identified the categories that they would fit into, and sort of rated them as to, the project and, did the application give the county a good idea of what they were going to do with the money, and did it fit with the goals that we had for the money. And so it went very well. We did it again in 2018. Again, I went through my entire district, and my district is 2 incorporated cities, Folsom and Citrus Heights, and then 5 other unincorporated areas. And so I encouraged every one of those areas to submit applications. I told everyone, even if you don't get it, at least it's good practice, and if you don't get it, we can take a look at that application and find out what you could do better next time, and maybe we could get some funds to you. And in the decision-making process this year, the board determined that in 2017, each board member had $50,000 to give to their district. And if you remember, it was Folsom that got my $50,000, which was the Johnny Cash Trail. And so this year we voted for $100,000 per supervisor to give to their district, which was fun because we had more money to give. It's always like Christmas when you get to give. And so there were those applications that rose to the top and just got the grant, not having anything to do with what was allocated by the different supervisors. And so Folsom did an outstanding job with their applications. And they received funds in several areas. And I'm going to just clarify with Matt real quick. All these are the ones that got it, right? Right, but these all got it also, right? Sorry, everyone. Yeah. We've had a busy day, and I haven't had a chance to. So Folsom received, for Friends of Folsom CERT, they received $32,000. Heart of Folsom received $30,000. That was it. And that was really like more than anyone in my district got. So Folsom really took it home again this year. So congratulations to Folsom. Many of our CERT members here, and they are planning on buying a truck with that fund, with the funds that they received. And they didn't receive, to my knowledge, it wasn't everything you needed, but you're going to be doing some fundraisers, is that right, to earn the rest of the money?
Yeah, go ahead.
You want to give tell us about it.
My name is Russ Brown. I'm the president of the Friends of Folsom CERT.
Come on up here, Russ, and tell everyone, since we have a little
So I'm just going to do it really fast. I don't want to spend a lot of your time. We really appreciate all the effort that you put forth, and helped us out and get these grants. But basically, what we were going for was we're trying to outfit a trailer for the CERT. CERT is Community Emergency Response Team, and we work with Folsom Fire Department and train on a monthly basis. So in the event of an emergency or a disaster in the Folsom area or the surrounding areas, we can be activated and be of relief to the citizens. So that's our kind of our goal of what we do. We were recently called to the fire, the campfire, and had we had this trailer, it would have been a lot better for some of our people, because there's showers, and there's a way to clean up, and there's a way to maintain things. It's self-contained. We had to go up there, and they had to go some distance to get to showers, and they were up there for days on end. So what the trailer that we were requesting is $32,000.
Oh.
Yeah,
yeah,
and we actually got half of that, so that's why we're doing fundraising.
I'm a little...
That's okay, I'm just wanting to clarify.
Yeah. Well, and let me say something about that. I apologize for that. I quickly pulled this together this afternoon. What I did with all the people in my district, we had so many too much. The very first thing we did was we tried to get as much as we could to everyone. We wanted to get as much as we could to more people. Mm-hmm. And so we thought if we gave a leg up, a really good leg up to more people, then they could go out in the community and maybe do fundraisers and come the rest of the way. So that was the rationale behind it. And almost everyone, some got less than half, but almost everyone got half of what they asked for. So did you get around 15,000? Yeah. Yeah,
we got pretty much half of it.
Yeah, and we have some work to do. So when you have that fundraiser,
and we are
call me
in that process of doing multiple fundraisers at the time to raise the rest of it. So I want to thank you. But that's kind of in a nutshell what we were doing.
It's good.
Questions? Okay.
That's good. Any questions? Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
And before we go any further, I want to ask Lori Easterwood if you would stand up, Lori. Lori's the library director here, and she's the one who makes this room available to us, and we appreciate it so much. Okay, next I wanted to kind of share a little bit about giving you a homeless update. In early 2018, homelessness, most of you are getting my newsletter? Mm-hmm. If you're getting my newsletter or looking at my Facebook page, you know that periodically I do like surveys to kind of see how people feel about things. And in those surveys over time, homelessness has usually been maybe third on the list behind public safety and roads. And in 2018, as the year progressed, homelessness has now become the top issue throughout my district. It's the number one concern. So we know it's a growing problem. And it's something that is on everyone's mind. And in the last 2 or 3 years, the county has been focused on trying to figure out how can we allocate money that is working well, that's actually working. What are we spending our money on? What's working best? How can we do better with this homeless situation? And the reality is we're not going to be able to cure homelessness. There are people out there that like being homeless and they don't want to come in. And so we know that, but if we can try to help those crossover that can, that's what we're working on. Now, recently, you might have heard in the news a few weeks ago about the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals case, Martin versus the city of Boise. Did everyone hear about that? Mm-hmm. And that was basically, what the court ruled was that you cannot criminalize homelessness. So if someone is not committing a crime, if they're not destroying vegetation, if they're not doing something wrong, you can't ask them to leave unless you have a place for them to go. And so that court decision set a precedent that we and that a lot of the jurisdictions are looking at very closely to ensure that we aren't pushing people out of a public space unless we have offered them a shelter. The challenge that we have in the last 3 years, as we did all these initiatives that have been going really well, the problem is we have all these social services, we have navigators, we have resources, but the one thing we don't have enough of is housing. And we don't have a place for these people to go. And the big problem is, what I perceive in my mind is probably a very big part of the problem, is mental health and also drug addiction. But mental health is a big one. And so we have been very carefully looking at that court decision and looking at how are we going to manage that. The county a few weeks ago did vote to proclaim a state of emergency on homelessness, and that positioned us for additional funding that we hope to pull down. But also there are other things that have been happening. There was also a proposition on the ballot, Prop 2. I don't know if you saw that one. But Prop 2 was all about it was about taking part of the Mental Health Services Act funds. And if you remember, Mental Health Services Act was the rich man's tax. It was voted, I guess, several years ago. And it was intended to provide funding for mental health services, and it did. The problem is we have all the services, but we don't have any place to send people to get the services. And so what Prop 2 did is it allowed us to pull bond money and funds from the Mental Health Services Act. It just sort of amended it so that we could utilize some of that bonding. And it put affordable housing developers back to work. And what I mean by that is it allowed for affordable housing developers to take, maybe allocate 30 to 45% of an affordable housing project that they're working on, and just allocate that portion of it to mental health service individuals, transitional facility or permanent housing for mental health. And what it did was it allowed them to utilize bond money, pull down on bond money for that, and use Mental Health Services Act funds to pay back those bonds. The good thing about that, there's several good things about Prop 2, and Prop 2 did pass. There were probably most of my district was not for Prop 2. When I surveyed, I think over 70% were against Prop 2 because they felt like either they didn't want to take away from mental health services, or they didn't want more bond debt. They didn't. A lot of my district is just not for more debt or more taxes. And so, but Prop 2 didn't add to bond debt. That was already money that was set up for that, and it didn't add to taxes. So what it was really doing was making that money more workable. And so an example of what the county is doing with that, there are some motels in the unincorporated county that have been blighted, and they've been a problem. They've had a lot of homeless or crime or blight. And so what we have, there are a couple of those motels that we are converting to affordable housing. But putting that together has been hard, because since the state of California pulled back on my mind just went blank. It happens every now and then. Redevelopment money. Remember when they did stop the redevelopment? When they stopped the redevelopment, that was the money that really kind of subsidized builders and made them able to pencil out those projects. So what this will do in a motel in North Highlands, the Courtyard Inn, which we're working, is in the progress, a work in progress now, is it will actually enable those developers to pull some of that bond money for 30% of their project, and that means they have the equity that they can get the bank loan for the rest of the project. And it puts them back to work. It puts them back in business. The challenge that the county has, or the concern that comes to my mind around it, is that on each one of these projects that we do, we have to make a 20-year commitment that we're going to have a on-site service provider there for those folks. And so we can't just go off and do a whole bunch of these. We have to make sure that we can afford the commitment that we're making behind that. The good thing about it is what they're saying about this type of a situation is that people who are maybe transitioning from a facility or transitioning that are getting titrated on their medications, or when they first move in, they can't quite be totally independent. They need some support. Initially, the first year or two, they'll use a lot of that support, but over time, they will become part of this community, and they're surrounded by other regular people, maybe lower income people, but they're not people who have challenges or, in the same way. And though that community around them seems to wrap around and kind of help them, and they kind of meld into that community, and over time, they're in a situation now where they can make it. They're doing fine. They have friends that look out for them or whatever. And so they're finding that this is a really good way versus a situation where you're putting someone into a big mental asylum with dark halls and people yelling. And, I've been in there because I used to be a nurse in nursing school. It was like, what did I get myself into? This was very kind of not a good atmosphere at all. So the Prop 2, I was excited to see that Prop 2 passed, and I want to also, I guess, highlight that they are estimating that at least 50% of our homeless people have mental health issues in some way. It could be mental health or drug addiction or whatever it is, 50% of the homeless people. And 42% of our jail inmates are on the mental health roll. 42%. So I wanted to go over a couple of the other propositions. There was Prop 1, which authorizes funds specified for veteran housing assistance programs. And that passed, and that's really great. That's going to provide more funding for veterans, for home loans, $1 billion for home loans for vets, and $1.5 billion for construction or rehab of rental housing. And then Prop 4 was authorizing bonds funding construction for hospitals providing children's health care. That's $54 million to UC Davis, which will be good for our region. And Prop 6 was the gas tax. In my district, the 83% overall were against, or were for repealing the gas tax. They were against the SB1 and they wanted to repeal it. I saw a map, and it was interesting because my district, it showed red was where they voted not to repeal it, and green was where they voted to repeal it. And my district was mostly green. There was an area in Folsom that showed they supported it, but it did pass. It did not pass. And so the good news around that is that hopefully there will be more funding for roads. Now in Folsom, you have a lot of newer communities, and so your roads are not like the roads in the unincorporated county. You don't have the backlog that we have in the unincorporated county. But the situation with roads is not good. When I was running for county supervisor, I remember going to the finance director during my campaign. I asked if he would meet with me to help me understand the county budget. And he was very surprised. And I did that because I wanted to make sure that the positions I wanted to understand, so I knew that my positions made sense. I didn't want to be blindsided later on. And at that time, the backlog for backlog on road maintenance was $450 million in the county. And more recently, the last number I heard was something like $700 million. The challenge that we have with road maintenance is that as the roads start to break down and they defer the maintenance, and the pavement condition gets worse and worse, and then rains come and everything gets it just exponentially gets worse at a deeper level, so that ultimately you have to tear down the whole road. You have to carve the whole road out in order to get to the bottom of it and redo the road. If you fix it in a timely manner, it's much cheaper, because you just do an overlay and it keeps the water out. But once it starts going deep down, it ends up being exponentially more expensive to repair. And nationwide, we have this problem where nobody wants to, there's some things that taxpayer dollars, this is just my opinion, okay? Some taxpayer dollars are collected for things that aren't very sexy, like fixing roads. But, politically, you can't get, it's not, it doesn't show quite as much. People may not notice it as much, but that cost, if it's not managed, it ends up costing a lot more. And I think a lot of these kind of things that maybe they don't seem like real impactful, conquer the world or save the day or, save the world issues. They're important to taxpayers because that's the services that we are supposed to deliver with their taxpayer dollars. And so to me, I think it's important that we do that. And I'm not quite sure how we tackle the problem with the roads now. The challenge we have now and the conversations that are going on at SACOG, Sacramento Area Council of Governments, which is a board that I serve on, is that we are going through a lot of change in transportation and how we transport ourselves. We are actually in a hurricane of change whereby it could potentially not only change the way we travel, but also change land use. An example of that is, has anyone here ever taken Uber? Okay, autonomous vehicles and Uber and ride sharing, and we actually have now the Smart Ride, which is the micro transit, which you can actually use a phone app and dial the bus comes to your house rather than you going to the bus stop. The way we travel is changing, and as that changes, people may decide they don't need as many cars. If they don't have the car because they're using public transit, they may not need to park. So we have all those parking structures. What are we going to do with all those? It changes whether or not, the conversation now is, do we spend money on more light rail? Do we spend billions of dollars to build more rail when they're possibly, right now, as we speak, they're doing tests in Texas where they're doing autonomous transport that takes you up and drops you where you want to go. It's not even using a road. And that's coming. All this new technology is emerging, and it's changing so fast that it's hard to know where it's going to land. It's like right now we're just trying to be creative and try to create low-cost solutions that will transport people and connect people to where they need to go. I think the hypertransit is a genius idea. It's awesome. And it's working so well that the county is expanding it, and it will be, hopefully, it will help those of us that are in the outlying areas that have felt like we weren't connected to transit as much. You in Folsom have the light rail, but those in Orangevale or Antelope don't feel connected in the same way. There was also Prop 10, which expands local government's authority to enact rent control. That did not pass. We had a conversation about that last time I was here, and I know that was controversial. It did not pass, and I feel like that was good that it didn't pass because rent control in the end ends up providing less housing for people, low-income folks, than otherwise. I wanted to share a little bit about a senior event. Did anyone here go to the 65 plus Ways to Save senior event? You probably in this city don't need Ways to Save. Most of the people in Folsom aren't really struggling as much as some of the other areas of my district. But believe it or not, I have seniors in some areas of my district that are calling me and saying, Sue, I don't know what I'm going to do if one more bill goes up. I don't know. I might have to figure out what, I may be homeless. And so in response to some of those calls that I was getting from seniors, I had an event at one of the complexes in Citrus Heights, and it went so well. And basically what we did is we invited vendors, only vendors who brought revenue, income, savings, or resources that augment the monthly budget. It wasn't a bunch of businesses trying to sell something to seniors. It was only, they were only invited if they brought one of those three things. And we actually had to turn away a lot of people. There were about 24 vendors there, but hundreds of dollars in savings every month for seniors that are living on the edge, maybe on Social Security. We had over 400, I think we had around 450 there, and it went really well. And we had little acting vignettes, Protect Yourself, where they did these little skits to show seniors maybe some ways to react if you're not sure how to react in a certain situation. Like one of them was the daughter trying to get the mom to sign over her house to her, or a neighbor trying to borrow money, or whatever. If you don't know what to do. And it was kind of fun because after it was over, one of the ladies that came up said to me, Sue, I was gonna have my house have a ramp built, and they've been rushing me, telling me I have to get this or I won't get the deal. And after that, I'm just going to tell them, no, I don't think I need to rush. I'm going to call a few more people, and because one of the things was, don't let people rush you. If they tell you the deal isn't going to be there unless you sign on the dotted line right now, don't let them rush you. You don't have to be rushed. You can control that scenario. Anyway, it was really great. It went so well that we really realized that I think the county has a lot of services that people don't realize are there. And so we want to try and a lot of people are saying that the silver tsunami is the next, it's the next big thing that's coming. To give you an idea, when I first came on board at the county, there were 135,000 people depending on the food bank every month to augment their budget to make ends meet. And I said that in the event the other day, and the guy from the food bank stood up and said, Sue, it's 157,000 now. So that number, there is that baby boomer bubble that's aging out of the workforce, and that is changing the whole dynamic that's going on here. So it's going to be a challenge to make sure we take care of our seniors. We can't have our seniors homeless. It breaks my heart even thinking about it. So now there's a lot going on at the county, but I think right now I'm going to open it for questions and answers. If anyone has any questions that you'd like to ask. I can't believe only a half hour went by and I'm actually on task.
The issue of homelessness with the motel you mentioned. Who maintains ownership of the motel when it's taken over like that for services and all?
So they build, the affordable housing developer builds it out, and they manage it, they build it, and they have a company that comes in and manages it. These are developers that specialize in affordable
So do
housing.
they end up buying an old hotel from the bank because it's not in a foreclosure or something? Okay.
Yeah.
So they end up.
And yeah, and they've been out of business for the last several years since redevelopment was canceled. And so they've been sitting on the sidelines trying to figure out how to get back in the game. And this is, for them, this is really exciting because we actually have a couple projects in the unincorporated county right now that are kind of teed up, and it's going to provide a couple hundred more affordable housing. But keep in mind, the affordable housing is not the only backlog in California. There's a backlog at all levels. There's just not enough housing, period, in California. Yes?
Yes, Supervisor Frost, on that issue, do they have to be working hard for affordable housing in the situation that you just described? They have to be employed then, is that it?
You mean to apply for to qualify to get in? They qualify based on their income. They have to have some kind of a revenue source. So if they're on Social Security or disability, then a third of their income can go toward housing. So if you're making $1,000 a month, your rent would be around $325. So for, the woman that called me who said, Sue, can we have coffee? And then we sat down for coffee at Coco's, and she said, I don't know what I'm going to do. If my rent goes up one more time, I'm going to be homeless. I make $1,700 a month, and my rent is $1,150. I said, oh my gosh, how can you do that? She said, Sue, it's not easy. So that's what seniors are up against. A lot of seniors, that's all they have is their Social Security. Yes, and then you'll be next.
You were talking about the mentally, I guess, was it people with mental illness and stuff, or challenged people. And I will say that a million years ago, in my 20s, I lived with my daughter.
A million years ago?
Yeah.
Wow. I'm not that old then.
Yeah, it was really neat. They had a program. It must have been a county program, and these apartments were really, really nice. But when the county supported, so that different people, mentally challenged, different types of stuff were supported in there. And it was wonderful because I got to know all the people. People have such different ideas unless they've been exposed, but it really made them part of the community.
Yeah,
here.
that's the good thing, I think, about this.
That's the key thing, and I even think things with the older people, it's better, like my dad said, he wouldn't do that, but it's better to have a community of all ages if possible, of people and different types of people.
And we have a 700 H Street, no, we're 700, but there's a building kitty corner to our county building that's in affordable housing. Those people pay something like $200 a month.
Oh, nice.
But
7th and H?
yeah, 7th and H. Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's clean. There's never any problems there. It's just a really nice. It works so well. It's like an apartment building, but it works really well in that context of having a big building, but they each have their own unit in their own home.
Really nice.
But they have support downstairs, wraparound support downstairs.
Yeah, that's key because they have the supportive services and there's transportation.
Yeah, and they're right next to transportation. Yes.
My question.
You're next.
My question is about voting, and we just completed the voting, and a lot of the responsibility for designing our ballots and our voting process goes to the county. It's taken me a while to understand what is the state's and what is the county's responsibility. And I had a very
Sounds like
frustrating
you've studied it.
experience getting information about voting. I'm a person who primarily does not use a mouse on a computer. I'm a keyboard person. I know the shortcuts and I navigate around websites, and the county's website is terrible for being accessible.
Oh, really?
For people with disabilities. And just recently, the county of Alameda also had a difficulty with their website being accessible, and they went through a process of planning to make it more accessible. And when I looked to see what the county was doing to make their website accessible to people with disabilities, and this is a lot of older people, and it might also be people with limited mobility, limited vision, limited hearing. Not hearing doesn't come into play that much, but in the statement on the county's website, it said they strive to make it accessible. And to me, that felt like they're saying, we try. And it's like, no, I want to know what you're doing and how I can access this on a different computer. I want to know what you've tested and that it works.
So
I don't want you just striving.
If you run into a problem on the county website and you're struggling with something, if you call my office, then we will call our IT and say, our constituents are struggling with this. What can we do to, we can absolutely work on that and try and get improvements. We've made adjustments. We immediately made adjustments on our webpage for District 4 to try to have everything, bam, right there, the minute you land on the page, or anything we thought you might want. That was not that was his
usually
brainchild.
There's a shortcut to skip to the content, or usually you can use a tab to move around a page, and it sometimes just doesn't work on the counties. And
Yeah.
I spend a lot of time looking for the information about what you do if you've made a mistake on your ballot. And I couldn't find that information at all. It basically seemed to say,
Okay.
get a new ballot. It's like,
Well,
okay,
you can go to the vote center. The ballot that you receive in the mail, you can fill it out and mail it in, or you can take it to a drop box, or you can go to the vote center without that ballot and say, I need a new ballot. Or you can take that ballot and say, I made a mistake, can you give me a new one? And they'll print it up right there for you. So, and you can go to any vote center. It doesn't have to be a vote center near your home. So you
I think
can.
when Sacramento changed its procedures, it used to be you could just put an X over something that you wanted to change, and I didn't see that, so I didn't try.
Yeah, right, and you don't want to get it wrong, because that's important. Your vote is important.
Right, I'm sure that it's automated, and I do want to have my vote be what I intended it to be.
So next time if something like that happens, just go to a nearby vote center and say, can I get a new ballot?
Okay.
I made a mistake on mine, and I need a new one. And they'll look at your ID and they'll get you a new one, no problem. And they open 10 or 11 days early, so you have
Oh,
time.
yeah. No, I found the center, and I actually went there and dropped it off. And
Yeah. Did you have something?
I do.
Matt?
Sorry, I work with Sue. I know.
This is my chief of staff, Matt Hedges. He's the smart one in the office. Does most of the work, I think.
About 2 weeks ago, I was working late at night at home, and my mouse broke, and so I had to shift to keyboard only. And I ran into the exact same problem you were, because I was doing research on the county website. And so it's funny that I was laughing to myself as you mentioned this, because the day after I went to my staff and I said, we need to do a study in all the different counties to see what they're doing. Our website's not accessible. So we're doing a study of the different counties, and then we're going to be going to the county administration and saying, there's problems, we need to fix the websites to get them accessible for exactly the same problem you're bringing
Oh
up.
my goodness.
So we are in the middle of a project right now to get that fixed, fortuitously.
It sounds like what you said, he totally understood. Wow.
Yeah.
That's great. That's good. I promise you.
Oh, that's okay. I just wanted to know what your building would cost the old high school.
in Folsom.
Build what?
They're building some kind of, is that a low-income housing?
Yes,
Where are you referring to?
yeah.
The old, across the street from the old high school, which is now East Middle School. There's 3-story buildings going.
Yeah, they're building, what are they building?
Houses.
My understanding is it's low-income housing.
Yes,
Like,
it is.
No, I think it's low-income housing.
I'm on the traffic safety committee, and I've sat in meetings where they talk about that before it was even built, but it's like 160 some odd units of affordable housing and studios. So some of the like ground floor would be like an artist studio or a store and retail, and then housing.
Good location for it.
Except for the traffic.
Well, they say that only added like, I don't know, 100 more car trips a day. Most of those people aren't going to have cars, or they're going to walk, and stuff. So
Oh.
we'll see.
Did that take up school property? In other words, did you lose from the school district's ownership, or was it private property people?
I'm not sure of all that. I know one piece of it was a parking lot for buses, and they closed that up a long time ago. And then a lot of it was just an empty an old abandoned baseball field, and it was just all abandoned for years.
I think it might used to be school district, but maybe the school sold the land.
Yeah, tore the building down and everything. Yeah, it's nothing there anymore.
All the new construction on the middle school that used to be the old high school is up. So they're not actually losing floor space. They just changed it around, I think. I don't know that officially, but that's what it looks like. Everything they're building there is 2 or 3 floors on where this whole school used to be and still is.
Wow.
So we kind of thought it was because it looked like apartment houses. Yes. But they're wrong about the traffic. My folks moved us out of LA because it started to look like around here. And around here started to look like LA lights. You know what LA looks like now.
But I can tell you that I remember 30 years ago when I would go down to LA for meetings, and the air quality was so bad, and I can tell you it's getting better down there, well, before the fires. But that's something we're working on really hard in the Sacramento Valley, is to make sure our air quality is good. We're trying to reach attainment. We're not there, but we're working on it real hard.
I have a suggestion for that. Make all the people in the Bay Area smog their cars.
The Bay Area does impact us. The Delta breeze comes in and blows Bay Area smog into our valley, and then it kind of settles in, and that's part of the reason we're having trouble reaching federal attainment levels.
Yeah, we're one of the worst counties. Yeah.
Well, and it's because of our geography, but we're challenged in that way. Any other questions? Yes.
Well, I'm thinking that I like when Sacramento is in the headlines in a positive way. And I think sometimes we have to be proactive and looking around the country and realizing the negative headlines in different places can come home to roost. So my comment is about our sheriff, and that Scott Jones is, in my opinion, not being transparent in how his officers are being reviewed, or the whole idea of an independent investigation possibility. So I wasn't real happy with the fight, I guess, between was it Brazil and Jones?
Did you have a question about it?
Well, I'm hoping that when it comes up for review as for the Board of Supervisors, you will advocate for more transparency for the Sheriff's Department. And in the long term, that will help protect our officers in the future.
So I'm glad you brought that up. We are planning to have a meeting on the 4th of December. Is everyone acquainted with the issue of the Inspector General and the Sheriff? What happened is a year or a year and a half ago there was a shooting, and the investigation has been ongoing, And over time, for some reason, the Inspector General, I don't know, I wasn't in the middle of all the communications, but the Inspector General released a report a little bit early before the DA had completed their investigation. And there was a situation that went down whereby the sheriff was fearful that, or not fearful, but concerned that it might not be independent, that it might be politically motivated because of the way everything went down. And he was very concerned about his department and his deputies who were being investigated. He was very concerned about the public, having the right for all the information, not just one side, but all the information. And he made a decision, that he needed to protect his department and close those doors. On the issue of the Inspector General, it was Sheriff Scott Jones who wanted the Inspector General in the first place. He's the one who wanted the independent review. He didn't have to have that. And so when he determined and really actually tried to work toward that, he brought it to the board, and it took time to get a right person that was qualified for that position. I guess in 2015, which is before my time, they finally agreed that Rick Brazil was qualified, and they brought him on board. The Inspector General is an independent review of policies and processes and procedures. It isn't his job to place judgment or to determine whether or not something is lawful. There's only one entity that can do that, and that's the District Attorney's Office. And the whole reason for the Inspector General, from my point of view, the way I see it, is that that is a person who sees through maybe some independent eyes, who is communicating with the general public, taking on their concerns and making us aware of those concerns, helping us manage those communications. But it's a person who's looking at, okay, this went down, and what went down, is there something we could have done better that would have, made us better, kept the community safer, or made us quicker or faster or better or whatever. It was all around how can we make sure that there's not anything we're missing that can make us the best department in California or in the U.S. And so it was all about, say the Inspector General saw an issue that might suggest that we needed more training in an area or something like that. So it was all around procedures and processes. It was not around law, okay? And the report that came out early, when it came out early, there were opinions around that shooting that, without the DAs, in every other report that had a officer-involved shooting where someone died, it was always prefaced in the very beginning of the report in the same way. I know, because I read every single one of them, paragraph by paragraph. I compared every paragraph to every single one all the way down. But basically, it kind of established a sort of a reporting protocol that he did. And he had never released one prior to DA coming out with their decision. Without that decision, the report took on a whole new meaning, and that was a concern for the sheriff, who had deputies who were still under investigation. Now, the DA report has come out, and the DA has stated that that was a lawful shoot. And they have, there's a 10-page or 15-page document describes every officer involved and the whole scenario that went down. It also describes the difference between an inspector general and the DA, how the DA functions. The challenge that we have at the board of directors is, you know, we are in charge of the budget. We do not have purview over the sheriff. The sheriff answers to the people. We approve his budget. So he has the authority to do what he did. We cannot control it. We've already been through that. We don't have control over that. What we do have control over is the budget, and where the inspector general is important to us is that it informs us as to the functions of the sheriff department. And you know, maybe we see these reports and it's obvious they need more technology or they need more training or whatever. We need to get them more money for that. You know, in a way it can inform us in our decision making on the budget. And we work with the sheriff in that, you know, we hire the inspector general at the county as an independent contractor. But the inspector general was not authorized by the county or the sheriff to release, you know, on how he releases his reports. He just did what he did. It put all of us in a bad situation because now we have this big thing, and it didn't have to go down that way. Now potentially, you know, the DA's decisions come out and potentially, you know, there could be civil litigation, and that now we'll go down that path of, is the inspector general going to testify against the county? You know, so now that puts this whole situation, we had hoped could work out in a way that we could keep Rick Brazil, who up to this point everything has been great with him, but to my knowledge, but you know, the sheriff has indicated and he indicated this in a public meeting, that he would be willing to keep Rick Brazil on. And the reason I think he felt that way was because it was so hard to get a qualified inspector general in the first place, and he wants an inspector general, and we do too. We don't want to go for another 2 years looking for another one. If we can get him, at least if we can just keep it going until we figure and keep working on this situation. So I think the sheriff has agreed that he would be willing to have Mr. Brazil remain as the inspector general. I don't know if he wants to. And that's number one. And number two, it won't be in the same, I'm not sure it can be in the same, there was some lack of clarity in the contract as to procedures and what, you know, someone can do. I mean, we all need to make sure that we're guarding the house that manages taxpayer dollars. We don't want to position ourselves for more lawsuits and more costs around, you know, we have a responsibility to the taxpayers. And so, you know, we're going to come back on December 4th. We're anticipating that hopefully we can find a way to approve an interim contract of some kind that will keep the inspector general in place. I think that's what everyone wants. It'll just be a matter of can we get to that point? And that's really what I want. I would like to have an inspector general. I think it's important to note that Sacramento is one of only 2 or 3 jurisdictions in California that has someone like this. This is not something that everyone has. This is rare. So, you know, to say that the sheriff is not transparent is a little bit not fair. I think he's more than transparent. He's more than willing to say, I need constructive criticism. We need input on that level, and he's already made that clear. But it can't be in a way that's going to jeopardize the county, and it can't be in a way that's going to jeopardize our deputies who put their life on the line every day for us. They don't deserve that. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. I'm hoping we can figure it out.
Can I have a follow-up on that? So sorry, what decision has to be made on the 4th? It wasn't clear to me.
The decision on the 4th is going to be, what we're hoping is that we can, the Inspector General's contract technically has expired, but we're hoping we can come up with an interim contract and that if he's willing to work, he has not stated that he wants to stay with the position. So he's gone quiet. He's been very quiet since all this. So we don't even know if he wants to, but if he does, it would be great, because then we can just keep, he can keep doing those functions until we can figure out either to replace him or he can stay on and just do it, but we need to have some clarity in how, what his job is and how that, the protocols around that.
Do you support funding for the Inspector General?
Oh, absolutely.
So if it comes to a vote, you will support that?
I don't support funding for an Inspector General that cannot access records, because the sheriff will not agree to that contract. The challenge we have is that, you know, we need to give them access to what they need in order to do the investigation they need. He doesn't, you know, there are some people who are saying, oh, the Inspector General needs full access. That's not transparent if he doesn't have that. But I have news for you. Even the deputies that work in the jail don't have full access to all of the, or that work in the sheriff department don't have full access to all of the department. There's levels of access, and not everyone has full access. So there's, I guess the challenge is going to be around the ability for the board to vote and agree upon a contract.
And you think that will happen?
I sincerely hope it will.
You and your colleagues. Because
I hope it will.
Well, to clarify, I mean, you said the only power you have over the sheriff's department is to control his budget. It sounds like, I mean, this is a threshold vote, potentially, because if the supervisors vote, you know, not to extend the contract or renew the contract, the only potential third-party oversight is suddenly vanished. If
the sheriff is not in agreement on the contract, and if the sheriff is not happy with, if it needs to be a contract that the board and the sheriff can both agree on.
But the sheriff doesn't vote on it.
No, but he has the power to lock to close his doors and not give access. And if he doesn't give access, he's essentially saying, no, you don't have access to my deputies who are under investigation. I'm not giving you access. I'm not sure there's not something politically motivated, and I need to know that my deputies are protected. So if he closes the doors, then we've signed a contract with someone who gets paid whether they have access or not. And I don't think it's fair to the taxpayers to spend $120,000 a year for someone who can't do their job because they can't gain access. Do you hear what I'm saying?
Well, I understand exactly.
It's a dilemma. It's a little bit of a dilemma.
Well,
but
it is a dilemma,
I think we can work through it.
Doesn't that question the authority of the supervisors to? I mean, what's going to? Well, I mean,
the supervisors don't have authority.
Well, he opens his doors or he doesn't. Mm-hmm. But I mean, the contract's in place.
It doesn't question our authority. We have the authority to approve a contract whether the sheriff opens it or not. But why would we do that? I don't think that's very smart. To hire someone to do a job they can't do, that's wasting money. I mean, we need to know that the job that there's a path to the end goal, which is for him to have access to what he needs access to investigate and to help us see, you know, through his eyes. Do you hear what I'm saying?
No, I understand exactly what you're saying. But if it gets fully funded and he shuts the doors and doesn't allow access, that's a big deal.
Well, it won't, that's why we're having this meeting. We're going to work through, you know, we will be working through what is it that the sheriff can accept, what can the board accept. We both have to come together on this. We have to work together. We have to collaborate on this. And if we can't come to an agreement that the sheriff is happy with, then there's no point in it until we can figure out how we can make that happen. So I don't think it's a matter of transparency, because I don't think the sheriff is saying he doesn't want to give access. He's just saying it's not unfettered. It'll, you know, in some cases, you know, like in the jails, it'll have to be to make sure for his safety and to make sure it'll have to work out with the department or whatever. I don't know. I don't really know that side of it. What I do know is my side. And my side of it is I want an inspector general. I always did. I'm sick that this happened because the public, I don't think the public really is getting a fair representation of the entire story that's going on behind the scenes. They're just getting what's in the newspaper. And it's not fair to the taxpayers who are going to pay for this person. He needs to be able to do his job, basically. And we don't want an inspector general, an independent review that's not independent. And when I say that, I mean that to the fullest extent. It can't be someone who leans toward the sheriff, and it can't be someone who leans against the sheriff. It can't be someone who's politically motivated. It needs to be someone who's sincerely looking at the situation and trying to see, is there something we can do to help our officers be safer, better, faster? Is there something we can do to make our communities safer? You know, that's what it's supposed to be for. That's what it was always for. It was to make the sheriff's department better. And I think up to this point it has been good, but somehow we got off track. Yes?
So this is why I came to this issue right here, is had the report come out after the DA's office issued their report, would this all have been fine? Or is the sheriff happy with Rick Brazil's report, and that's what made this be a problem? Because if this would have come out after, what's the difference? If he's looking at policies and procedures and training and safety, if we get sued, we get sued. If that's going to change a policy to make the deputies safer and the public safer, that's the way some of those things work. But I guess my first question is, had this report come out later, would we be having the discussion?
Well, I read every single Inspector General report. There weren't that many of them. There were some officer-involved shootings that did not result in a death, so that didn't involve the DA, so that those don't count. Those did come out before the DA's conclusion because there was no DA conclusion. The ones that did involve officer-involved shooting came out. There was criticism in every single one I read. There was. So for anyone to say that the sheriff couldn't take the criticism, well, I'm pretty sure that's not accurate, because there was criticism in every report. And when I talked to the sheriff about it, he said, Sue, that's what it's for. I mean, we want to hear those things. We don't always act. We don't always respond maybe in the way he suggested. An example of that is where the Inspector General suggested that, you know, the sheriff, in a report, at the end of the report, that the sheriff should have a policy committee, hire a policy committee that updates their policies and procedures as to corresponding to updated state law every 3 years. Well, the sheriff, when I asked the sheriff, well, why didn't you do that? Because he said that. He said, well, Sue, you know, I get where he's coming from, but we don't have a budget to hire a whole department. And so what we do is real time. When a policy at the state level changes, we update our procedures right then and there, real time. And we don't need a full-time staff around that. We can't really afford it. We're trying to get more people on the streets, in the neighborhoods. So, you know, we are responding to trying to be as up to date and with things, but, you know, there's more than one way to solve, you know, there's more than one solution to every problem. And so I think what I heard in my conversation with the sheriff was that he wasn't upset at all about criticism.
So it's time.
It was that when the report came out early, I think it was the timing on the report, the fact that it ended up in the news the next day, or that, you know, the very next day. It was somehow he was not sure it was unbiased. That was what he said. That was what he said to us. He wasn't sure. He was concerned that it wasn't a fully independent review, that there might be political motivations. And if there is political motivations, that's not the kind of Inspector General we want. And I think part of the discussion we had at the board was around there needed to be, maybe there was a lack of clarity in the contract. And
but I think if the sheriff is agreeing that this is a good person for the job, and the sheriff is agreeing that he wasn't hurt by any of the criticism, then those two conversations don't align. I think that to better control this, and maybe in the contract you have that the report cannot come out until after the final report from whatever investigating agency. But I think for the sheriff to say that this person cannot have access is ridiculous for transparency. Because if I don't like what somebody's going to say, I deny them access. But if I like what they're going to say,
you know.
And then also I think access is incorrect. With access means if I ask you for something, I'm hoping you will give me everything. It's
Right.
not to wander around the jail. It's not
Right.
to wander around the sheriff.
Exactly.
So that is not what access.
That's the way I look at it too.
But
And
that's not what Rick Brazil is asking, is to wander around aimlessly and open drawers. I think that's a kind of a ridiculous.
Well,
to equate it.
I
But I think what he's saying is, if I go to if I meet with your internal investigations, if I meet with your officers, I expect to get what is, fair reports. I expect to get the reports that have come out. And I think he has every right to do that. And you guys vetted. You guys looked for years for this person. So I have a huge problem with how this has turned out, and I hope, and I'm glad you asked the question, because my question was going to be,
have you read the finish?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Go ahead and finish.
That I hope you will support having him be the Inspector General, and if you have to tie that money to their training budget, then tie it, because you guys have control.
Well, I can, have you read the district attorney's report?
Not yet.
Okay, you need to read that.
I know that hers is different and their office's is different, but
I can tell you that, here's what I can tell you that is the crux of, what you're talking about is unfettered access. What I'm talking about is we cannot, we do need some clarity. I can understand why the sheriff had concerns, because either way, the DA could come out and say that was an unlawful shooting, or they could say it's a lawful shooting. They came out and said it was a lawful shooting. They had a de-escalation, a qualified, hugely credentialed expert on that subject, which Mr. Brazil is not, who examined it and talked about it in the DA's report. And now we have a situation where, yeah, according to the law, it was a lawful shooting, but in theory, I read somewhere that the family has an attorney. Are they going to sue now those deputies in civil court, and are they going to ask our Inspector General to testify, and if so, I could see where a sheriff who has deputies who are putting their life on the line every day wants to close the door to something that might be potentially endangering their case. It's his job to protect his deputies and to stand behind them while they stand behind us.
And it's also his job to correct, and I
it's not the job, it's not the job.
It's also the job of the sheriff to do training if what that Inspector General or whoever, or the internal affairs, to say that this needs to happen, then it's his job to do that, to also protect those deputies.
It's not his job to do it. It's his job to look at it, seriously look at it, and if his department, and review it, and and make adjustments if necessary, if he hasn't already done so. He doesn't answer to the Inspector General. He answers to you, and you, and you. He answers to us. We voted him as our sheriff, and he is the last line of defense against anything that can take our rights away and take our safety away. And so he is he's an important individual. That position is important. But, you know, I think that's where people are getting confused because of the way it's been reported in the news. They don't understand that, you know, the sheriff is an elected person who answers to us to keep us safe. And he has a responsibility to that. And he also has a responsibility for the integrity of his department and the morale of his department. And so I'm trying to be unbiased. It's really hard because, you know, I can't control what happened here. I wish it wouldn't have happened. I wish he would not have released it early. I wish he would have gone by the same protocol every time, because it seemed like then everyone had all the information all at once and we didn't get worked up into something that everyone's just assuming. We got into the middle of something that didn't have to happen, you know, if it would have just gone by the same protocol. And it's really too bad, but now we're here and we got to figure out how to work our way through it. It's hard. But I recommend that you read the DA's report, because you'll kind of see what that expert opinion who came in and what his opinion was on it, and you'll kind of be able to compare it. So now I was going to tell you we were going to be done at 7, and it's now 7:15, and I thought this was going to be a boring night, but it hasn't been boring at all. And I'll stay as long as you guys want. If you have more questions, I'm happy to stay. And I want to thank you all.
Will we find the report on the county website, the DA's? Is there going to be a link we can access via our keyboard to the DA's report?
The DA's report's available on the DA's website, but if you get my card after the meeting, I'll email it to you.
Okay, great, thank you.
If you email me, I'll email it to you.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Thank you.
Okay. Good job. Thank you. I'll email you. Okay. Because I don't know. I can't attend this meeting.